So let's take a look at the module overview slide. We've got two basic sections. We've got how to deploy applications, all of the variety of ways of doing that. And then we've also got restricting applications. How do you restrict them? So let's just get into it. First section here is how you deploy applications. And there's a variety of ways of deploying applications. And in this section, we'll also talk about application virtualization. So there's something called presentation virtualization. There's app V, or application virtualization. And we'll talk about all of these concepts. So our first slide with content then is first to be aware of the two different types of apps you can deploy. There's desktop apps. That's the way things have been for quite a long time. And just be aware they've renamed application to app. So it's a desktop app now. And then Windows Store apps that came out with Windows 8. So both of these can be deployed in a variety of ways. Take a look at the desktop apps side of things here on the slide. Typically you've got yourself a setup.exe or some kind of MSI file. Be aware of what an MSI file is and what services used to install MSI files. An MSI file is a Windows installer file. And the Windows installer service is the service in charge of installing an MSI file. Why should you care? Because one of the cool things about MSI files and Windows installer service is that it's resilient. So maybe you've seen this before, or maybe you're using Microsoft Office or a program like that, and maybe you get prompted for, hey, the software is missing a file. Go ahead and put in your Office DVD to get that file back. And that's an example of that resiliency happening, where if a file becomes corrupt, the Windows installer service can help that application go back to the source installation media and get back those files. So also, MSI files are supposed to have a clean removal. So if you uninstall a piece of software that used an MSI file, theoretically it would perfectly remove itself from the registry and then system files. It doesn't always work that way, of course, but that's the idea behind MSI files. Let's take a look at the executable for MSI file installations, because you might get a couple of certification questions about that. So I'm going to head to the command prompt, and the executable is MSI exec. So it's MSI executable.exe. And this has a lot of switches, and for certification purposes, you should know some of these switches. You might want to come back here in your own time, do a /?, and just check out your different options here. At least have an idea of, if you want to install a piece of software just independently, you can do a quiet mode versus a passive mode. What's the difference there? We've got a couple other switches down here as well. So, for certification purposes, be aware of this executable, be aware of some of the switches you might have to use. Let me show you one other thing here. We're going to go to computer management, and we'll go to services. I'll show you that this is an actual service. It's called the Windows Installer Service. So we'll just jump down to the W's. There it is, the Windows Installer Service. And notice the path to executable is MSI exec. So there you go. Okay, so let's head back to the PowerPoint slides. Now let's say you deploy software through group policy. You're probably deploying MSI files then, or through System Center. You're probably deploying MSI files. So when you deploy the MSI file out to the client system, the Windows Installer Service is the thing on the client system that helps install that piece of software. So let's go on to Windows Store apps then. So the other application type, you can install these from the Windows Store. It's also possible to have your own corporate, so to speak, Windows Store for corporate applications. You can also sideload Windows Store apps. And that means you're installing them on a system that doesn't have access to the Windows Store for some reason. So we got a screenshot here of installing a desktop application just normally. If you put in a DVD, usually you get the auto run menu that says, what do you want to do? And so here we see that someone's popped in an Office DVD. And so we see the prompt that comes up to run setup.exe. Or you can go to the Windows Store to install a Windows Store application. So the Windows Store is just out there on the start screen. Go to Windows Store, and then you could search for all kinds of applications out there. So I mentioned briefly, you can do group policy deployment of software. You can also do the System Center Configuration Manager can deploy software, and Windows Intune can also deploy software. So lots of different varieties of a lot of different methods to deploy software. As far as the Windows 8 certification exams go, you don't have to know the specifics of how to deploy software with these different methods, but you need to be aware of these methods and perhaps some of the differences between these methods. So for example, one difference between regular group policy deployment and System Center deployment would be that with System Center you can schedule deployments, whereas with group policy it just pushes out whenever the clients next contact the domain controller.
Yeah, another thing that's interesting is that when we talk at Microsoft about light touch, we generally are talking about Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, and that's where the deployment is set up in a task scheduler, and we do a somewhat of a light touch to kind of propagate out the deployment of usually OSs, but sometimes we do applications OS and everything together. Zero touch is a term you'll see every once in a while, and that's generally associated with a real centralized configuration management tool. And so the one here at Microsoft, of course, System Center Configuration Manager 2012 R2. And when we say zero touch, that's what we're talking about. And as you alluded to, I think it was on the last module anyway, you can integrate these two. You know, the MDT can actually be working in conjunction with the System Center 2012 R2. And what you have there is you set up the deployments and all your task sequences, and then in the MDT, and they kind of hand it off over to System Center 2012 R2. So you get that zero touch all the way across. And that's really the ideal way of managing or deploying software. Once you have it deployed, then of course you have System Center there to manage the applications too. So it's kind of an end-to-end scenario that we have there. So we're going from one extreme, which we're going to be talking about, I think, when you just plug that CD, all the way over to everything just being installed for you across your organization.
Yeah, yeah. So just to be clear, just a fine-tuned difference, you can deploy an image of an operating system that includes the applications that you want. We can also deploy the applications individually. So
that's correct.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's keep going, and the next thing to talk about is remote app. Now, back in the day, there was this thing called terminal server, and people knew what that was. It's a word, a phrase that was used for a long time, and then about Server 2008, they renamed terminal server to remote desktop services. But if those of you who've been around for a while, if you remember the terminal server, what did you do? You logged on to the terminal server remotely, and so you're logging onto the server remotely, and you're running programs on the terminal server. And they just simply renamed that to remote desktop. So you can still use this technology. It's still there. It's just been renamed to remote desktop. And your terminal server is now the remote desktop services session host server because it hosts sessions. So you use remote desktop to connect to the RD session host server, and you can get a full desktop and still run applications on the RD server, or you can get what's called a remote app. And this is a very cool feature where an application is running on the remote server. It's running on the RD session host server, but the application appears as if it's running locally on your computer. So you can do real simple examples of this where maybe you run Notepad on the RD session host server. You run Notepad locally. It looks like there's two Notepad windows open, but you literally cannot tell the difference. They look like they're both running locally. So this is a fantastic way of, they call this presentation virtualization. So we're not using virtual machines. We're not truly virtualizing it, but they call this presentation virtualization. It's being presented to the end user as if it's running locally.
All right. Yeah.
So got to know some of the things here about remote apps. So on our slide here we have RD session host servers. So definitely be aware of that, and also be aware that they're not using any local resources. The application is running on the remote server, the RD session host server. And then how do you connect to these? So as a client, there's a couple ways to connect. One is that we have a screenshot here of something called RD Web Access. So if you look in the upper right-hand corner of this screenshot, it's a little tough to see there, but it says RD Web Access. So that's a web page people can go to see any remote apps that have been deployed and made available to them. Notice also on this PowerPoint slide, about in the kind of the top middle, right next to remote app and desktops, you'll see connect to a remote PC. So this is all using remote desktop under the hood. It's just, are you seeing just the application, or are you seeing a full remote desktop? Another way to access your remote app programs is through remote app and desktop connections on the client side. So there's a control panel way to do that, and now with Windows 8.1, there's a way to publish those to the start screen as well. So you can just go to your start screen to see all of your published remote apps in the list. So let's keep going. How do you deploy remote apps? I kind of got ahead of myself there. So you can publish those through RD Web Access or through the start screen. And you can also control the behavior of all this through group policy as well. And that's it for remote app.
Great.
Next up here is application virtualization. And now we are getting into more authentic, I would call, virtualization, where an application is running in kind of a sandbox separated from other applications. So the key differentiator here is, let's say you've got two applications, App 1 and App 2, and you need to run them both on the same computer, but they don't want to run on the same computer. Maybe they have conflicts with the registry or the file system or just different versions of the same application. Maybe that person's a developer and they need to run 2 different versions of the application. So how do you make this work? So AppV is a solution that you can use to help isolate applications in their own little sandbox so they don't interact with each other. So if you have compatibility issues, it's going to be a great solution for you. So AppV comes with MDOP, the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack. So we mentioned that in another video. You got to know all the tools in MDOP for your Windows 8 certification exams now. So AppV is in there, UEV is in there, MBAM, Dart, a couple of things. So definitely check out MDOP before you take your Windows 8 certification exams. Anyway, back to AppV. What else we have here? AppV has a local client that has to be installed on the client system so that you can run these virtualized applications. Another cool thing about AppV is, look at this third bullet point here. It says that applications can be either streamed or installed locally. So it's really up to you as the administrator. You decide if it's installed locally, then this allows them to run the application if they are no longer connected to the network. So if they need offline access to an application, then you want to say, all right, allow them to install it locally. The streaming feature, you can say, well, only allow them to use that application if it's being streamed from an AppV server. And in that case, if they lose their network connectivity, then they lose access to the application. Right. And there's another way to do that. You can also stream it and do offline caching as well. So if they do lose their access, they still have the application. But anyway, it's up to you ultimately how you want to configure AppV to work.
Great.
Yeah. Let's see here. So that's about it then for AppV. Let's keep going here. We've got the next concept with AppV is, well, how do you get your applications ready to be deployed through AppV? There's something called the AppV sequencer. So this is just it's kind of like a snapshot. Like you take a before snapshot, you install the application, you do an after snapshot. That's just an analogy, but they call that process sequencing. So we see the steps here in the PowerPoint slide. So you prepare the sequencing computer, you start the AppV sequencer, then you install the application that you want to, quote, sequence, and it's going to keep track of all the file and registry changes that happen during an installation. And then it captures all that into .appv and .msi files. And here's some other infrastructure ways of having AppV. One is called the standalone deployment model, where, hey, you've sequenced those applications into an MSI format, and then you use your MSI files, and you deploy that through Group Policy or System Center, or however you normally deploy your MSI files. So that's a way you could deploy an AppV application. It's just an MSI file. The second major option here is the full infrastructure model, and that's where you can do the streaming to client computers. And the bottom one here is you can also integrate AppV with System Center Configuration Manager. So that's it for that section on application virtualization. A couple other ways you could virtualize applications. You could use Hyper-V with virtual machines. You could have a full-on virtual machine. That would be another way to virtualize an application. You can have Hyper-V locally with a local virtual machine, or you can have Hyper-V with a virtual machine remotely and connect to the application remotely as well.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Many ways to spin it.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll go on to the next section called application restrictions. And let's go to, so there's 2 different ways to restrict applications. We've got SRP, Software Restriction Policies, and AppLocker. SRP came out with XP, so that's been around for a long time, and it enabled people to allow or block applications. Mm-hmm. And I'll do a demo here where we see the different rules you can make. There's but the classic rule is a path rule. What's the path to the executable? And you can say to allow or deny that executable. The problem with SRP is not really a problem per se, but it lacked granularity. It didn't have a whole lot of features. It was a fairly basic way of allowing or denying software. So if you're in an enterprise environment, you need something a little more fine-tuned, a little more granular, then what you'll do is switch over to AppLocker. AppLocker came out in Windows 7. And it's got more control, more features. It's got, for example, you can do version control. You can say, hey, only allow Adobe Reader version 9 or above, or something like that. So you can control the versioning of software that you allow to run. And we've also got Windows Store apps can be controlled through AppLocker as well. So possible disadvantage that this came out with Windows 7, it's only supported by Windows 7 and later. So if you have any XP or Vista still out there, you'll have to go back to the older SRP, Software Restriction Policies.
Got it.
Let's see here. So next up here is AppLocker rules. Now, AppLocker is got a better way of helping you get set up and create what are called default executable rules. So if you look at this bullet point list, it's just basically saying that by default, users will be able to run apps in the program files folder, go figure, and the Windows folder, go figure. And that may sound like it's so simple, but back with SRP, it was much more difficult to set that up. So it's really nice to have these automatic rules now with, I shouldn't say automatic, these default rules with AppLocker. Also, AppLocker can scan your system for software and for scripts and for executables. And by scanning the system, it can help you quickly generate a bunch of rules of whether you want to allow or deny that software on the system. So AppLocker is the way to go if you can go that way. So I think that's about it, but I'll just do the demo. For AppLocker on a single system, you can just do a start run gpedit.msc. gpedit, that's the group policy editor. If you just run this on a local system, what's going to open up is the local group policy. And I've already got that open. So here's our local group policy editor. These are all the settings for a local system. And what I've done is already kind of expanded out the section to save us some time here. So group policy, we didn't really talk about group policy because we went too long on another video, but just a real quick gist of it is it's got two halves, the computer half and user half. Computer half, we don't care who's logged on. We want those settings no matter what. User half, we do care who's logged on. So in this case, we're looking at a computer half setting. We don't really care who's logged on. We want to make sure that we're allowing or blocking the same software for everybody here. So all of our, not all of our, but most of our security settings are here under computer configuration. A lot of our security settings. So here's software restriction policies, and by default, none are defined. And then below that is application control policies. If you expand that, that's where AppLocker is. So let's take a look at SRP real quick. We'll just right-click this and say, hey, let's make some new software restriction policies. And there's two basic ways to go with this. You can say, allow all software except for what you want to block, a blacklist, or block all software except for what you want to allow, a whitelist. And so there's the security levels are basically disallow all software or unrestricted for all software. And then you make your exceptions under additional rules. So you'd right-click additional rules and say, here are the 4 rules. So we talked about a path rule, for example. So, if you wanted to block access to the registry editor, for example, you could say, hey, let's block C:\Windows\system. Oh, whoops, I did not mean to do that. I don't know what just happened there. Yeah, block C Windows. That's not good.
Good luck there.
Good luck with that. That's right. I accidentally hit enter. Okay. System32 /regedit.exe.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, this is just blocking access to the registry editor. So
yeah, right.
Maybe you're doing this for particular users who've been kind of monkeying around
Keep
with
going
the system.
in there, making misses.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, something to be aware of with all this software restriction business is that you probably want to use variables, because if you're using group policy, you can do these rules once and then push them out to many machines. So different machines might have the operating system installed on different drive letters. Yeah. So what we can do instead is browse. Let's browse to the C drive, Windows, System32, and we'll add in registry editor here again. And I just want you to notice what happens here when we do this. Almost there. Almost there. Stay on target.
There you are.
Did I miss it? Wait. Well, we'll pick on this one. That's fine.
Yeah,
whatever.
Let's go to 32. It's the only one I use anyway.
Okay. Well, what you might want to do instead is %windir%.
Yeah.
That way you're catching it on all the devices.
All the pathways.
So we're saying block the software. When I used to teach SRP in my classes, I would jokingly say, hey, nobody can play solitaire, so I'm going to block sol.exe. That's where solitaire used to be before they removed it. So sol.exe, that'll block solitaire. Well, let's say I block solitaire with the path rule. The problem with that is that what if somebody gets wise to the system,
puts it back in the
and they move or copy the executable somewhere else, and so they still run their solitaire. Block solitaire. So my joke was say no solitaire. You can play all the free cell you want, but no solitaire. No.
That's good. That's good.
Okay, so if that's the case, you want to make a hash rule. So we'll go to additional rules and make a hash rule. And what this does is say, well, let's browse the executable, and then as long as they run the executable, no matter where it is in the system, the hash of that executable should be the same. And what the hash means is that it's the same version of the executable. It's going to take a while to get down there. Okay, there we go. And so here's our hash rule. I'll apply this. And it just made a hash of regedit 32. So the idea being if somebody copies this executable somewhere else and they still try to run it, too bad, so sad, the hash is still the same, so the system here will still block that software.
Exactly. Very cool.
Okay, additional rules. We've also got network zone roulets, Internet Explorer zones. You can block based on that. And we also have a certificate rule. That's also known as a publisher rule. So you can block software or allow software from particular vendors that have digitally signed their software. So we'll leave that alone. I'm going to delete these rules. I don't want to mess anything up here, even though it's just solitaire and regedit. Okay, so I got to have my solitaire, right?
Yeah.
All right, so that's software restriction policies. You just have the 4 rules. It's fairly basic. Let's go to application control policies and app locker, and let's see what's different here. Well, one thing that's different is you've got executable rules. You can do an exe like we just did, but we can also do rules for MSI files. That's Windows installer rules.
Okay.
We can do script rules. That's totally new. You couldn't do that before.
Yeah. And
then packaged app rules. Now you got to be aware for certification purposes that packaged app means Windows Store app. Packaged app means Windows Store app. So there's a way to block that kind of software too through App Locker if you so choose. So let's take a look at executable rules then. We'll go ahead and right-click this and let's create the default rules. And notice it just kind of pops in right away. What are the default rules? There are 3 default rules, and you should know what the default rules are. They're just basically saying allow everyone access to run all files located in the program files folder. Allow everyone access to all the executables in the Windows folder, and then allow administrators to run anything in any folder.
You can do anything they want.
Yeah. So why would you maybe not do this? Well, you're doing this because you're basically saying allow all software except for what you do if you create some new rules that block software.
Okay.
But if you want to, you can go the other way and say delete all of these, and then you could say only put in allow rules like a whitelist. What are the specific applications you want to allow,
Back
and
to
not
that
have these default
include,
rules.
exclude kind of way in which you want to look at things. Sure.
Absolutely. So let's make a new executable rule. We'll go ahead and see what this looks like. So we're going to say deny software. In this example, we're going to pick on Adam in marketing.
I think we did this last time.
Yeah, I think
Or
so.
Adam.
It's the same. Yeah, so marketing group. We'll say the marketing group will be denied access to what? Notice again, we can do a path rule to the executable. We can do a hash rule, or we can do a publisher rule. That's the same as certificate rule from SRP. So path rule, and we're going to say browse to regedit. So we'll go to C Windows, System 32. Oh, that's why we're not finding it. It's in the root of It's in the root of Windows. I misspoke slightly. So C Windows regedit. That's where regedit is. Notice App Locker is a little more intelligent. It's going to pop in that variable for you right away. So the Winder regedit exe. And next up here is you can add exceptions. So again, App Locker has more granularity, more control. You can say, well, run. You can also say run a folder of executables, but then add an exception for a particular executable. I'm going to skip all the exception business though, and we'll just say what's the name of this rule, and you can just leave the default name if you like, or name it yourself. Anything else you want. But notice the name here is a little more descriptive. This is what we're trying to block. Regedit and Winder. Okay, so now Adam Barr, who's in marketing, should be blocked from running regedit. Okay. But is he? Well, let's keep going here. Let's look at some other options here. So Windows installer rules, it's looking for an MSI file. We cancel out of that. Script rules. Let's go ahead and let's do something different here. We'll create some default rules, and then we'll have this automatically generate rules. Now what this will do is scan your system for all scripts on the entire system. So same thing as before. So with executable rules, if we were to have chosen that, it would scan the entire system for all executables. So we'll go to script rules, we'll do that for scripts, and just see what happens here. So we're saying, okay, well, let's say analyze the program files folder for scripts. And we're saying the rules will apply to everyone. And we're going to create publisher rules for files that are digitally signed. We can just kind of skip a lot of this, actually. Let's get to the generation process. That'll take a few minutes here. So what this is going to do is scan through, find all the scripts in the system, and then when we're done with this, we still have not actually enforced anything. We have to go to the app locker kind of higher in the hierarchy here in the properties and to say we need to enforce the app locker rules. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll enforce the executable rules, but we'll just do auditing for the script rules. That way we're not messing anything up on the computer here. If you look at the screen here, we've got 494 rules were found out of 2,429 files. So imagine you had to do that yourself manually. Back in the day with the SRP, you'd have to do that manually. So we can see the rules that will be automatically created. We can see all these scripts that are in there. A lot of JavaScript here, a lot of JS files. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and create these, and it's just going to make all these rules.
Look at that.
And notice by default it's allowing all these, because that's what I said. I set it to allow everyone all these scripts.
And it says at this point you can kind of exclude at this point. You're probably picking and choosing through here.
So let's go back up to App Locker, and there you can configure enforcement of what you've just done. So far what we've just done is actually kind of pointless. We haven't actually blocked any software whatsoever. So here at the top level on advanced, you have to say, well, for executable rules, let's go ahead and say that that's configured. And notice you can choose to enforce or audit. Audit is great if you're just trying this out and you want to see what would have happened if you had blocked all this. And then you can go to the event viewer and see all the events that are logged.
Great, yeah.
So we're going to say enforce for executables, and for scripts, we'll just say audit. And then we'll go ahead and apply that. And I think that's all we're going to do here. So we'll click OK. And in order for App Locker to work, we have to have a service running. So let's go out to services. And that service is called the Application Identity Service. So application Identity Service, that's got to be running. Notice by default it's not running, so we need to start this up. And be aware if you're deploying App Locker rules to your environment, you'll probably have to use group policy to say, hey, App ID service, make sure you're turned on all the time.
Right.
Yeah. We will also have to go to the command line and do a GP update. And we're going to do a GP update force on this one. So having done all that, I'm going to go back to computer management, and we can check for these things in Event Viewer. So we can go to Applications and Services Logs, and in there is a log for App Locker. So we'll come back and check that after we block someone from using software.
Okay.
And it's still working. Okay, so the GP update's done. We'll close that out. Our local group policy settings, we're done with that. And computer management, I think if it's in system or not. Okay, so all this is telling us right now is that the group policy update that I just did was processed successfully. New settings from 2 GPOs were detected and applied. So that just means we just applied those App Locker settings.
Got it.
Okay, so we'll sign off, and we'll sign back on as Adam in marketing.
Poor Adam.
Yeah, poor Adam. Okay, datum / Adam. Okay, and then we will try to run regedit. Let me go to a command prompt. We're logged on as Adam. We'll run regedit. And that failed miserably. So let's see here. Let's try that GP update again, just in case. Actually, I'm going to double check the service too. I'm surprised that didn't kick in right away. But hey, we logged on as Adam, so maybe that's what we have to do. Oh, the service is running. Well, we're good. Okay, let's try this again. There we go. Just had to do a GP update on Adam, so I did that prematurely. So it says, hey, this program has been blocked by group policy.
That's a really good.
There we go.
Really good example of running GP update.
Yeah, troubleshooting, it works. Let's go to computer management. We'll check out Event Viewer. Actually, hey, it's right there in the Power User menu. I should just go straight there.
I love that thing.
Let me just close this out. We'll go straight there. Maximize. We'll go to Application Services Logs. To that huge list of logs we saw before, and we'll look for App Locker. There it is. And we should see error.
There you go.
Regedit was prevented from running.
All right.
There we go.
Poor Adam.
Poor Adam.
No, it's a good demo.